Okay, guys, I really didn't have enough time to cover everything I wanted to cover in this Alec Baldwin series in the last video. So we covered the fact that the armorer is responsible for making sure those rounds are dummy rounds, not the actor. One of the other ways they could tell would be to dismantle the round. Now, had Alec known the exact weight they were supposed to be, taken them to a scale, pulled them all out, and checked them, every time he got handed a gun, no doubt people would have said he was difficult to work with. Oh, you don't trust the armorer? Are you calling me incompetent? I mean, a lot of these things could happen, and this could create arguments on set. I'm not saying that it did. I'm saying that it could. I'm saying that you really shouldn't count on somebody else to do it for you. I agree with that. But at the same time, this is not your typical situation. This is a movie set. And on a movie set, you are expected to work with the cast members, and they all have a job. Just like as an actor, you don't tell the cameraman how to do his job. You don't tell the director how to do their job. That kind of stuff will get you fired. You do not tell the armorer how to do their job. Unless you have to. Now, according to what I'm hearing, there were two separate incidences where a live round was fired in a gun that wasn't supposed to have any. There were accidental discharges, quote unquote. An accidental discharge means it wasn't supposed to go off, but it did. Well, that makes the shooting the third accidental discharge. That's 3. Keep track. If what I'm hearing is accurate. Now, let's assume that that is. That means she already knew that there was a problem, that there had been live rounds in that box of dummies, because when she pulled out the dummies and loaded the last gun, it had a live round in it. Did she then go through the whole box and check it by weight, like she should have, and weigh every single round? Because when you weigh the round, you can see that the primer has been removed. You can see that the gunpowder has been removed. All those things weigh. What should have been done is she should have checked every single one of those rounds by weight. Doing that would have solved the problem. She would have known. In fact, if Alec had wanted to check them properly, that is what he should have done. That didn't happen. Now, you can blame Alec for that if you want, but I'm an actor and I've never brought a scale to a set. I served. I worked with a lot of guns. I never brought a scale and checked all the bullets. Never once did I dismantle the bullet to make sure the gunpowder was in it, even though lives were on the line and I was going to be firing it in combat. My life was depending on that round. And I never once checked them. Never. Nobody does. They give you a box of bullets. You trust that it has been made correctly by the manufacturer. It is no different for Alec when he gets bullets put in a gun for him by somebody who's supposed to be a professional, like me, an expert. They hand off the gun to him and say, hey, this is cold. This can't fire. Don't worry about it. And now you're telling me it's his fault because he might have pulled the trigger? He did not know there was a bullet that was live in the gun. If that is the case, how is he responsible? How is he supposed to treat it like it's a real live gun? I never treated an empty gun like it was a live gun. I treat them like bloody paperweights. I've always said there's nothing more useless than an unloaded gun. It's a paperweight. Because in and of itself, unless you're going to bludgeon somebody to death with it, it's not dangerous. The only way that's dangerous is if there's a live bullet in it. And Alec knows that. And instinctively, when you know the gun is unloaded, that there's nothing that could hurt you in it, you tend to be a little more lax. That being said, it's really easy to demonstrate what could have happened just here with my fingers, okay? There is a couple of ways this could have happened. One, if I grab that old gun and I just pull the hammer back, when that happens, you will feel the click at the end of that travel. There's actually 2 clicks in that set of travel. One at the top, which is like a safety notch. If you let the hammer go from there, it won't fire. But the hammer has tensioned the trigger, which means that from that point, if I pull the trigger, it should cock the hammer and fire the weapon if I keep pulling. That's what they call double action. When you pull the trigger, it performs 2 actions. It cocks the gun and it fires the gun. When you have a single action only gun, which is what a Colt single action Army revolver is, you cock it, it does nothing to the trigger. The trigger doesn't move at all. The trigger doesn't have any tension until it's cocked. Now, there's a little plate inside that has a little metal outcropping that rests up against the hammer. And when you pull it back, that click is what you're hearing. That hammer pulling past that point and clicking up against that metal. That's what you're hearing. When you pull the trigger, you are removing that little outcropping of metal from the hammer. As you pull the trigger, it leans back that section of the metal plate that has the little outcropping, and that fires the gun. Okay, fair enough. But if I tell you that you take that trigger, you pull it, and then you cock it and let it go, it fires the gun, even though you didn't pull the trigger after you cocked it. It's called fanning. You pull the trigger and you go boom, 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 boom. You don't keep pulling the trigger. You hold it down one time, and you keep holding it down while you draw back the hammer repeatedly and fire it. That's a quick draw technique. I've done it. I've done shooting demonstrations with a single action army revolver, and it was a Colt, and that's how it worked. This is not rocket science. They're a well-known gun. They've been out forever. This is how they work. So let me say to you that if ALEC were to take that gun and put his hand in the trigger, on the trigger, like he was doing for a movie, like he's supposed to be ready to fire, you can't have your finger like this, like you would normally tell somebody to do. Put the finger alongside the trigger guard. In the military, if I saw somebody put their hand on the trigger and it wasn't a firing exercise, I'd be freaking on them. They'd have got a reprimand for that. If I saw somebody point a gun in somebody else's direction, same thing. But here, he's being told, okay, here's the camera. You guys are the perspective of the cameraman. Okay, so I've got my gun. Does this look realistic? Does this look like I'm about to shoot the gun? Or is this just my finger? Of course it doesn't look realistic. By the same token, they need to see leads in the end. They need to see your finger on the trigger. All that has to be there. Now let's assume that his finger's in the trigger guard, because he's told to. That's what they're asking for. And he pulls back that hammer, but he has touched that trigger. Now if he's pulled it back a little bit, it might still fire. I can't tell you the exact millimeters you need to pull it back before that no longer engages the lock when you pull back the hammer. And the reason I can't is because it depends on the state of the weapon. The more wear is on that metal plate from use, the farther back you might think you have to pull the trigger. It's the other way around. The shorter the distance, you're going to have to pull the trigger before that lock is disengaged, because there's less of that metal in the way. So you don't have to pull the trigger very far. On top of that, even if the gun's fully functional and perfect and brand new, if I pull the trigger, let's say as I'm squeezing the gun, as I take it in my hand, then I cock it and let it go, it still fires. That could be what happened. Even if that is what happened, unless ALEC knew there were live rounds in the gun, it is not his fault. He was told there are no live rounds in the gun. Why would he be worried about letting the hammer go? Keith out.